All right, today we're jumping into a fantastic research paper that sits right at this incredible intersection of AI and, believe it or not, material science. It's a story about creating a brand new material, teaching an AI to figure out its properties. And what happens when the smartest AI in the room makes a brilliant but physically impossible mistake? Let's get into it.
So our story kicks off with these things right here. They're called cenospheres. And really all they are these tiny, hollow, lightweight particles that are a byproduct of coal-fired power plants. Yeah, basically industrial waste. But scientists saw some real potential here to create new, super lightweight materials. The big question, though, is what's the perfect recipe?
And that right there gets to the heart of a huge problem in material science. I mean, you could spend years, maybe even decades in a lab just mixing and testing different combinations. It's slow, it's super expensive, and honestly, there's no guarantee you'll even find what you're looking for. So how do you innovate without that endless, costly grind?
You see, for the longest time, material science has pretty much relied on this mix-and-see approach. You combine some ingredients, you test what you made, you tweak the recipe, and you do it all over again. And hey, it works. But it also means we can only ever explore a tiny, tiny fraction of all the possible new materials out there. It really is like looking for a needle in a haystack.
But this is where machine learning comes into the picture. The whole idea is to create a kind of virtual lab. So instead of physically mixing chemicals, an AI model sifts through data from old experiments to predict what new ones will do. It's a way to digitally test thousands of recipes in a flash, which saves a ton of time and money. And it might even find combinations a human scientist would never have even thought to try.
Now, in this study, the researchers didn't just use one AI. Nope. They actually set up a little contest between two different digital minds to see which one could better predict the properties of their new material. And this is where things start to get really fun.
So let's meet our two AI scientists. On one side, we have what's called a shallow artificial neural network, or ANN. It's got just one hidden layer for processing. So let's think of it as our cautious rookie. It's smart, for sure, but it really just sticks to the most obvious trends in the data. And on the other side, we've got a nonlinear deep neural network, a DNN. With 4 hidden layers, this is our brilliant but kind of eccentric detective, built to find those deep, complex, hidden connections that everyone else might miss.
So what does that actually mean, layers? Well, at its core, an AI's brain is a neural network, and you can pretty much think of these layers as layers of thinking. The more layers you have, the more abstract and complex the patterns the AI can pick up on. One layer might see a simple straight line, but 4 layers can see an intricate winding curve.
Okay, but before these AIs can predict a single thing, they need real-world data to learn from. So the researchers had to head into the actual lab to create a physical baseline for their new material.
The material they're making is what's called a composite. It starts with this flexible polymer, polyurethane, and then they reinforce it with our tiny hollow cenospheres. The whole goal here is to make the polyurethane stronger and stiffer, but also way, way lighter.
And the process is very methodical. First, you mix the ingredients together. Then you use a vacuum to suck out all the tiny air bubbles. After that, you pour the mix into molds, and then you just let it cure for 10 days. The researchers did this for 5 different recipes, with the cenosphere content going from 0 all the way up to 40%, and that gave them their 5 key data points.
And the results from the lab, well, they were exactly what you'd expect. If you look at this graph, as the percentage of these lightweight spheres went up, that's along the bottom axis, the material's density on the side axis went down in this nice, predictable, almost straight line. This is our ground truth. This is the physical reality that the AIs have to learn from. So, now that they're armed with this real-world data, the researchers fed it to their 2 AIs and asked them, hey, predict what happens if we push the recipe beyond 40%. And this is where our story takes a very, very strange turn.
First up was our rookie AI, the shallow ANN. It looked at those 5 data points and, well, it made a perfectly sensible prediction. It saw the simple downward trend and just assumed it would keep going. Add more lightweight spheres, the material gets lighter. Logical, predictable, and maybe a little bit boring.
But then it was the eccentric detective's turn. The more complex 4-layer deep neural network was fed the exact same 5 data points. It was designed to see patterns no one else could, and oh boy, it did not disappoint. But not in the way anyone expected. Just look at this graph. The deep neural network's prediction starts out fine. It's following the real data, those red dots. But then, after that 40% mark, it does something impossible.
It predicts that adding more of the lightweight spheres would actually make the material's density go up. I mean, think about that. It predicted that adding a lighter ingredient would somehow make the final product heavier.
Which is, of course, physically impossible. It just breaks the basic laws of physics. So what on earth happened here? How could the more powerful, more complex, quote-unquote smarter AI make such a fundamental, nonsensical mistake?
And the answer, well, it gets right to the heart of how we really should think about AI. Not as some magic box, but as a very specific kind of tool. A tool that absolutely needs a human expert in the driver's seat. So here's the breakdown. The powerful DNN is built to find complex, hidden, non-linear patterns. That's what makes it so smart. But with only 5 data points to work with, it basically overthought the problem. It found this really complex mathematical curve that fit those 5 points perfectly, but in the real world, that curve was complete fiction. It was a classic case of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And this gets us to this amazing paradox, right? The simpler rookie AI, it just wasn't powerful enough to overthink it. Its simplicity kind of forced it to stick to the obvious and correct linear trend. But the more powerful detective was so good at finding complex patterns that it invented one where none existed, leading to that impossible prediction. And here is the most subtle and maybe the most dangerous part. If you only looked at the raw performance stats, the mathematical scores for how wrong each model was, they look almost identical. These scores, like mean absolute error, are just ways of measuring accuracy. And based on these numbers alone, you would have no idea one of them was predicting science fiction. It took a human scientist, someone who understands the real world, to look at the graph and just say, wait a minute, that's impossible. It's a perfect example of why you can't always just trust the numbers. So what did the researchers do? Well, they intervened. They realized that the 4-layer DNN was just total overkill for this specific question. So they built a new, simpler 2-layer AI just to predict the density. And what do you know? It worked perfectly. It predicted a continued, steady decrease, just like it should have all along. They chose the right tool for the right job. And that really is the key takeaway, isn't it? It only took one human expert with real-world knowledge to look at what the AI put out and immediately see that it was nonsense. The machine can calculate, but the human understands. So why does this one little experiment matter so much? Because it shows us the future of scientific discovery. AI is an unbelievable accelerator for sure, but it is not some all-knowing magic 8-ball. The biggest breakthroughs aren't going to come from AI alone. They're going to come from a partnership, brilliant human scientists guiding these incredibly powerful new tools. So in the end, this story isn't about an AI failing. It's about us learning how to work with it. The researchers figured out the goal is to create physics-informed models, AIs that are actually guided by our real-world knowledge. It's all about building that powerful partnership between the intuition of a human mind and the incredible calculating power of a machine. And that is a future that's definitely worth building.